should have quit the first night they told me about the car. Hell, I should have walked out during training when the old attendant, guy named Frank, with the shaky hands and the 1,000-yard stare, leaned in close and said it like a prayer he didn't believe in anymore. Whatever you do, Mike, there's one car you're never allowed to charge. Green 92 Chevy Caprice. Lift the gate. Let it through. No ticket, no money, no questions, ever. He wouldn't look me in the eye when he said it. Just kept wiping the same spot on the counter, like he could erase the words if he scrubbed hard enough. I laughed it off. Thought it was some hazing thing for the new guy stuck out here alone on County Road 47. That was 14 months ago. I wish I could go back and punch that laughing version of myself in the mouth. The booth is nothing special. 10 by 10 concrete box sitting on the shoulder of a 2-lane blacktop that cuts through pine forest so thick the trees look like they're trying to swallow the road. No shoulder lights except the one rusty pole that flickers every third night. Inside, there's a dented metal desk, an ancient cash drawer that sticks unless you kick it just right, a folding chair with the stuffing coming out, and a space heater that smells like burning dust the second you turn it on. The window in front is thick plexiglass with a sliding payment tray that squeaks like it's in pain. One security camera mounted in the corner that's been dead since I started. Red light, burned out years ago according to Frank. I keep a little battery radio on the shelf above the drawer. It only picks up one station after midnight, some AM gospel hour that crackles in and out like it's being broadcast from underwater. I took the job because I needed quiet. Divorce had left me with a truck payment, a stack of medical bills from my ex's hospital stay, and the kind of silence in my apartment that made the walls feel like they were leaning in. Night shift at the toll booth paid decent, came with a small trailer out back for sleeping during the day, and promised exactly 0 small talk. Most nights I see maybe 12 cars between 10 p.m. and 6 a.m. Truckers mostly. A few drunks who think the back roads will keep the state troopers off their tail, and the occasional lost tourist who stares at me like I'm the last human on earth. I take their $2.50 in cash, hand them a little white ticket they'll probably throw out the window 2 miles later, and wave them on. Easy. Lonely. Exactly what I wanted. Until the rules started eating at me. The note was taped under the cash drawer with yellowed Scotch tape that had gone brittle. Same handwriting as Frank's shaky scrawl on the training sheet. Green Capris, do not charge. Gate up. No questions. I found it my third night when I dropped a quarter and it rolled underneath. I peeled the note off, read it twice, then stuck it back exactly where it was. Figured it was a joke. Or maybe some local big shot who didn't want to pay. Rural roads have those stories, old money families who think the rules don't apply. I told myself that and went back to my thermos of coffee. Night 4, the radio died right at 2:57 a.m. Not the usual static fade. 1 second the preacher was talking about forgiveness. In next second, nothing but a flat hiss like someone had unplugged the whole world. I smacked the side of the radio. Nothing. Then the temperature in the booth dropped so fast my breath fogged. I remember checking the heater. It was still on high, glowing orange. I stepped outside to see if the power had gone out on the pole light. The air smelled wrong. Not like pine or night damp, but like cold metal and something faintly sweet. The way blood smells right after you cut yourself. I stood there in my hoodie, arms crossed, listening. No crickets, no wind in the trees, just the low hum of the booth's fluorescent tube above my head, and the distant whoosh of tires on asphalt maybe half a mile off. A pair of headlights appeared around the bend. They were too low to the ground for most trucks. Moved too smooth. No engine sound I could hear over the distance, just the soft crunch of gravel as the car slowed for the booth. Green. Old. Boxy body like they don't make anymore. The kind of sedan your grandpa would have driven to church. Tinted windows so dark I couldn't see inside even when it stopped dead center under the pole light. No front plate. Rear one was there, but covered in mud so thick it might as well have been blank. The car sat idling, but I swear the idle was wrong. Too quiet, like the engine was breathing instead of turning. My hand went to the ticket machine out of pure habit. $2.50. That's what I do. That's the job. The drawer was already open, quarters cold against my fingers. I leaned forward toward the payment tray. Then I remembered the note. I froze with my arm half out the window. The car didn't move. No window rolling down. No horn. Just that low breathing idle and the fog from my own breath curling around the plexiglass. I pulled my hand back like I'd been burned. Reached for the gate switch instead. The red light above the booth flashed once, twice. Then the striped arm jerked upward with a metallic groan that sounded too loud in the silence. The Caprice rolled forward without hesitation. No thank you wave. No brake lights flashing in acknowledgement. It passed under the gate and kept going. Tail lights shrinking into the dark like two dying embers. I watched until they disappeared around the next curve. That was when the first real wrongness hit. The radio kicked back on mid-sentence, preacher's voice loud enough to make me jump. And the Lord said, "Do not suffer the stranger among you." I slammed the off button. The heater smelled stronger now. It's like something inside it had scorched. I sat down hard in the folding chair and realized my legs were shaking. Not from cold, from the way the car had looked at me. That sounds insane, I know. Cars don't look. But the way the windshield had reflected the booth light for just a second. There was a shape behind the wheel. Tall. Still. Watching me right back. I told myself it was nothing. Told myself it again while I counted the cash drawer for the third time that hour, even though only 3 cars had come through. The coins felt colder than they should have, like they'd been sitting in a freezer. 1 quarter had a tiny dent in it I hadn't noticed before, shaped almost like a fingerprint. I set it aside and tried to laugh at myself. Rural job, long nights, imagination running wild. Classic. And the next car that came through was a semi at 3:12 a.m. Driver was a regular older guy named Earl who hauls gravel for the county. He always pays exact change and complains about the price of diesel. Tonight he didn't say a word. Just handed me the money, took his ticket, and stared straight ahead like he was afraid to look at the road in front of him. I asked if everything was okay. He gave this tiny shake of his head, almost like a warning, then pulled away without another sound. I watched his taillights until they were gone too. By 4 a.m., the woods had started making noise again. Crickets, an owl somewhere off to the east, the soft rustle of something small moving through the underbrush. Normal sounds. I should have felt better. Instead, I kept replaying the moment my hand had hovered over the payment tray, and what would have happened if I'd dropped the $2.50 into the slot. The thought sat in my stomach like spoiled milk. I walked the 10 steps to the trailer behind the booth to make fresh coffee. The trailer is basically a tin can with a cot and a mini fridge. Inside, the air felt the same as the booth had. Too cold, too still. I flipped on the light and the bulb buzzed louder than usual. My reflection in the little mirror above the sink looked pale, eyes too wide. I splashed water on my face and told myself out loud, "It's just a car, Mike. Some local weirdo who doesn't want to pay tolls. Happens everywhere." The words sounded thin even to me. Back in the booth, I tried the radio again. Gospel station was gone. Now it was pure static with something underneath it, like a voice trying to push through from very far away. I turned the dial slowly. Nothing but more static. When I looked up, the pole light outside was flickering again, slower this time, like it was tired. The forest beyond it looked thicker, the trees closer to the road than they had been at the start of my shift. I blinked hard. Of course they hadn't moved. Trees don't move. At 4:47 a.m., another set of headlights appeared. Same car. I know how that sounds. It had only been an hour and 40 minutes since the first pass. No way it could have turned around out there. The road dead ends into private timberland 8 miles north, and there's no turnaround big enough for a sedan without backing up for a quarter mile. But it was the same green Caprice, same dents, same mud-caked rear plate. It slowed exactly the same way, stopped exactly the same place under the pole light. It's as the engine breathed that same quiet rhythm. My heart started knocking against my ribs so hard I could feel it in my throat. I didn't reach for the ticket machine this time. My hand went straight to the gate switch. Up it went. The car rolled forward. As it passed the window, I caught the faintest movement behind the driver's glass, like someone tilting their head to look at me one last time. Then it was gone again. Tail lights fading exactly the same way. I sat there for a long time after. The radio was dead silent now. No static, no preacher, nothing. The coins in the drawer had that same freezer burn on them. One of the dollar bills in the stack was folded wrong, corner creased like a tiny triangle pointing toward the note under the drawer. I hadn't touched the money since the first car. Ouchie, I pulled out my phone even though I knew there'd be no signal. One bar flickered, then died. The time on the screen read 4:49 a.m. I could have sworn it was closer to 5. I checked the cheap digital clock on the wall. It said 3:33 a.m. The second hand wasn't moving. I tapped the glass. Nothing. When I looked back at my phone, it now read 3:33 a.m. too. That was the moment the dread stopped being a whisper and became something solid in my chest. I stood up so fast the chair fell over behind me. I needed to move. Needed to do something normal. I grabbed the broom from the corner and swept the booth floor even though it was already clean. Dust swirled under the fluorescent light. When I bent to empty the dustpan into the trash, I saw something glinting under the desk. A quarter. The same one with the fingerprint dent. I could have sworn I'd set it aside earlier on the far corner of the counter. Now it was back under the desk. Like it had rolled there on its own, I left it there. Didn't want to touch it. Outside, the pole light had stopped flickering. The forest looked normal again. A deer stepped onto the road about 50 yards north, stared at the booth for a long second, then bolted back into the trees like it had seen something it didn't like. I watched the spot where it disappeared until my eyes burned. The rest of the shift crawled by in small, careful pieces. A minivan at 5:15 with a tired mom and 2 sleeping kids in the back. She paid with a 5 and told me to keep the change. I tried to smile. My face felt stiff. Another trucker at 5:40 who didn't even slow down all the way just tossed the exact coins into the tray without stopping. I know I logged every plate like always, but my handwriting was shaky. At 5:55, the sky started to lighten behind the pines, that ugly gray that comes before real dawn. I should have felt relief. Instead, I felt watched. I locked the booth at 6 sharp, walked the 20 yards to the trailer, and didn't look back at the road once. Inside, I pulled the curtains tight, lay down on the cot fully dressed, and stared at the ceiling. Sleep didn't come easy. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that green hood reflecting the pole light, the shape behind the wheel tilting its head. That was one night, one car, twice. I told myself it wouldn't happen again. Told myself the clock thing was a battery glitch and the coin was just me being tired. I even peeled the note off the drawer again and read it out loud, like it was stupid. Green Caprice. Like, do not charge. Saying the words didn't make them feel any less heavy. The next night I started my shift at 10 like always. The booth smelled faintly of that sweet metallic scent again, even though I'd left the windows open all day. The radio worked fine. Gospel station clear as a bell. The cash drawer opened without sticking. Everything normal. I almost believed it. Until 2:58 a.m. The radio cut out exactly like before. The temperature dropped. And far down the road, 2 low headlights appeared around the bend. I didn't even hesitate this time. Gate switch. Arm up, car through. But as it passed, I noticed something new. The driver's side window was down 2 inches. Just enough for me to see that the person inside was wearing a dark coat, collar turned up. No face, just the suggestion of one. And the hand resting on the wheel. Pale, long fingers, no movement at all. The car disappeared. The radio came back on. This time the preacher wasn't talking about forgiveness. He was saying my name. Mike. Mike, don't open the gate next time. Mike! I turned the radio off so hard, the knob came loose in my hand. I spent the next 40 minutes pacing the booth, heart hammering, checking the road every 10 seconds. At 4:03 a.m., the Caprice came through again. Same everything. Same tilt of the unseen head. Same cold coins left behind in the tray, even though no one had paid. By the time the sky lightened, I had counted the same stack of bills 17 times. The triangular fold was back on the top dollar. The clock on the wall had stopped at 3:33 again. My phone agreed. I didn't sleep at all that day. Just lay on the cot, listening to the woods outside the trailer, as waiting for the sound of an engine that never came. When the sun went down, I almost called the county office to quit. My thumb hovered over the number for a full minute. Then I remembered Frank's shaky hands and the way he wouldn't look me in the eye. He hadn't quit. He'd just passed the rule on like a curse. I went to work instead. Night 3 of the pattern was when the small changes started stacking up faster. The booth light buzzed louder. The payment tray squeaked in a different key. When the first car of the night, an old pickup, stopped, the driver handed me 3 crumpled singles and a nickel. He looked at me strange when I gave him the ticket. "You okay, buddy? You look like you seen a ghost." I laughed too loud. He drove off frowning. Then came the Caprice at 2:59 a.m. This time the window was down 3 inches. I guess I caught the glint of an eye, just one, watching me. The temperature drop was sharper, almost painful on my skin. When the gate went up and the car rolled past, I smelled that sweet metallic scent strong enough to make my eyes water. The radio didn't come back on at all. Instead, the pole light outside popped once and went dark completely. The only illumination left was the weak yellow bulb inside the booth. I stood at the window staring into the black forest and realized my hands were clenched so tight my nails had cut little half-moons into my palms. The second pass happened at 4:01 a.m., window down 4 inches now. More of the face visible, pale skin, no mouth that I could see, eyes that reflected the booth light like an animal's. The car idled longer this time. 5 full seconds. It's long enough for me to feel the urge to step outside and walk up to the driver's side. Long enough for me to wonder what would happen if I broke the rule and charged it anyway. The thought felt like someone else's, pushed into my head from the outside. I didn't move. The gate stayed up. The car left. After it was gone, the coins in the drawer weren't just cold. One of them had a thin layer of frost on it. I touched it, and my fingertip went numb for a minute. The triangular fold on the dollar bill was sharper, like it had been pressed with something heavy. I spent the last hour of my shift sitting on the floor with my back against the desk, knees pulled up, radio knob still clutched in my hand like a talisman. When 6 a.m. finally came, I locked the door behind me and walked to the trailer without turning on the flashlight I usually used. In the dark felt safer than the light somehow. Inside the trailer, I didn't bother with the cot. I sat at the tiny table and wrote down every detail I could remember on the back of an old receipt. Times, temperatures, the way the engine sounded, the eye, the frost. When I finished, I looked at the paper and realized my handwriting wasn't mine anymore. The letters were too neat, too careful, like someone else had guided my hand. I crumpled the receipt and threw it in the trash. Then I dug it back out and smoothed it flat again. I needed to remember. I needed to keep proving to myself that I wasn't losing it. That afternoon, before my next shift, I drove into town for the first time in weeks. Bought extra coffee, batteries for the radio, a cheap motion light to mount outside the booth. And the cashier at the hardware store asked if I was the new guy on 47. When I said yes, she gave me the same look Earl the trucker had given me, like she knew something I didn't. "Heard Frank retired sudden," she said. "Real sudden." I didn't ask what she meant, I just paid and left. Back at the trailer, I mounted the motion light on the pole outside the booth. Tested it 3 times. It worked fine. I felt a small, stupid surge of control, like I had done something to push back against the night. It didn't matter. At 2:58 a.m., the radio died. The temperature dropped. The motion light never clicked on, even though the green caprice rolled up slow and stopped directly underneath it. The car sat there in the dark like it belonged to the shadows now. Window down 5 inches. I could see the lower half of a face, chin, no mouth, just a suggestion of teeth behind pale lips. The eye above it was fixed on me, not blinking. I lifted the gate before the car even fully stopped. My hand was shaking so bad I almost missed the switch. This time, when it passed, the motion light finally flickered on. Too late, pointing at nothing but empty road. The car was already gone. But in the sudden glare, I saw tire tracks in the gravel shoulder. They shouldn't have been there. The Caprice had never left the pavement. Yet the tracks were deep, fresh, and they curved slightly toward the booth, like the car had considered pulling in for just a second. I stood at the window until the motion light clicked off again. The silence after was worse than any sound. Inside the booth, the cash drawer was open even though I hadn't touched it. Every coin inside was frosted over, It just the triangular fold on the top bill now pointed directly at the note I'd taped back under the drawer. I didn't sweep the floor that night. I didn't pace. I just sat in the chair and waited for the second pass, counting my own heartbeats like they might run out. It came at 4:02 a.m., window down 6 inches, mouth visible now, small, curved, in something that wasn't quite a smile. The eye still fixed. The car idled for 10 full seconds, long enough for me to smell the metallic sweetness so strong it coated the back of my tongue, long enough for the motion light to click on again, this time pointing straight at the driver's window like it had finally noticed something worth illuminating. I saw the hand on the wheel lift one finger, just one, a tiny wave, or maybe a beckoning. Then the car moved on. After it left, the radio came back on full volume. The preacher wasn't preaching anymore. He was whispering my name over and over like a secret. Mike. Mike. You almost did it tonight, didn't you? I ripped the power cord out of the wall. The motion light stayed on for the rest of the shift, even though nothing triggered it. When I finally locked up at 6, I noticed the tire tracks were still in the gravel. Deeper now, like something heavy had sat there longer than I remembered. I didn't sleep. I sat on the trailer steps with a blanket around my shoulders and watched the sun come up over the pines. The light felt thin, like it was afraid to touch the road. 4 nights, 8 passes. The rule was the only thing keeping me safe, and every single time I followed it, the car took a little more silence, a little more cold, a little more of my name spoken from places it had no business being spoken. I thought about quitting again, thought about calling the county office and telling them the booth was haunted or cursed or whatever the hell it was. But then I pictured Frank's face, the way he'd handed me the keys and the rule like they were the same thing. He'd lasted years. I could last longer. I had to. Because the worst part, the part that made my stomach twist every time I closed my eyes, was how close I'd come on that last pass. How the finger lifting off the wheel had felt almost friendly, almost inviting. How part of me, some small exhausted part buried under all the dread, had wanted to lean out the window and drop the $2.50 into the tray, just to see what would happen. I buried that thought deep. Told myself it was exhaustion. Told myself tomorrow would be different. But tomorrow was already tonight, and the green Caprice was already on the road somewhere out in the dark, breathing quietly, waiting for 2:58 a.m. to roll around again. I went inside the trailer, locked the door, and sat on the cot with the crumpled receipt in my lap. I added one more line to the list I'd written the day before. Night 4. It waved at me. Then I crossed it out so hard, the pen tore the paper. I wasn't going to give it anything else. Not tonight. Not ever. The woods outside were quiet again. Too quiet. And somewhere down County Road 47, headlights were already turning toward the toll booth. The headlights cut through the dark like they always did now, right at 2:58 a.m., low and steady and wrong. I was already standing at the window before the car even rounded the bend. It's a gate switch under my fingers, heart hammering so hard it felt like it was trying to climb out of my throat. The motion light I'd mounted the day before stayed dark. It didn't matter that the Caprice rolled straight under it. The sensor might as well have been blind to that particular green paint. I flipped the switch anyway. The striped arm groaned upward, slower than usual, like the mechanism itself was tired of this routine. The car didn't speed up or slow down. It just kept coming at that same breathing idle, window rolled down, exactly 6 inches from the night before. I pressed my forehead against the cold plexiglass and stared. The pale hand on the wheel lifted again. 2 fingers this time, not a wave exactly, but something deliberate, acknowledging me. The eye I could see caught the weak yellow glow from inside the booth and held it, unblinking. No mouth visible yet, but the chin tilted slightly, like it was listening for something I hadn't said out loud. The sweet metallic smell rolled in through the payment tray, even though the window was only cracked. It coated my tongue like I'd licked a battery. I didn't move. Didn't breathe until the car slid past and the gate clanged down behind it. The radio stayed dead. No preacher whispering my name tonight. Just the low hum of the fluorescent tube above me and the soft crunch of tires fading north. I counted to 30 in my head, then walked over to the cash drawer. It was already open. Every single coin inside was covered in that thin frost again. But this time the frost had patterns. Tiny branching lines like frost on a window pane. Only they formed letters. Not words I could read. Just shapes that looked like they were trying to spell something in a language I didn't know. I slammed the drawer shut so hard the whole booth rattled. That was new. The pattern was tightening. I spent the next 20 minutes pacing the narrow space between the desk and the back wall, boots scuffing the same 3 feet of linoleum over and over. Every time I passed the window, I glanced out, half expecting to see the taillights coming back already. They didn't. Not yet. The woods were too quiet again, the kind of quiet that made the hair on my arms stand up. No owl, no crickets. Just the occasional soft pop from the space heater like it was arguing with itself. I tried the radio cord, plugged it back in. Nothing. The dial spun, but the speaker stayed silent, like the station had packed up and left the planet. At 3:17 a.m., the first regular car of the night showed up, a beat-up Ford Escort with a college kid behind the wheel, blasting music so loud I could hear the bass thumping before he even stopped. He handed me exact change without looking up from his phone. I slid the ticket through the tray and watched him drive off. Normal. Human. The kind of thing that used to be my whole night. Now it felt like a courtesy visit from the real world, brief and already slipping away. The clock on the wall still read 3:33 a.m. My phone agreed. I tapped the glass again. The second hand twitched once, then froze. I set the phone down on the desk and backed away like it might bite me. Time wasn't just slipping anymore. It was folding in on itself around that green car, and I was stuck in the crease. I tried to do normal things, counted the cash again, and refilled the ticket roll even though it was still half full. Wiped the counter with the same rag Frank used to use, the one that smelled like old coffee and regret. Every motion felt watched, not by the camera in the corner. That thing had been dead for years, but by something outside the plexiglass, something that had learned my routines better than I had. At 3:45 a.m., I stepped outside for air. The motion light clicked on the second my foot hit the gravel, flooding the shoulder in harsh white. I walked the 10 paces to the trailer, unlocked the door, and grabbed the spare flashlight from the shelf inside. The beam shook in my hand as I swept it across the road. The tire tracks from last night were still there, deeper now, pressed into the gravel like the car had gained weight. As I followed them with the light until they curved slightly toward the booth again, stopping right at the edge of the payment tray's shadow. I crouched and touched one. The gravel was cold colder than the night air, and when I pulled my finger back, there was a thin layer of frost on the tip. Back inside the booth, I left the motion light on. It stayed on. No cars had passed to trigger it, but it stayed on like it was waiting too. The second pass came earlier than before. 3:58 a.m. I was halfway through writing another note on the back of a receipt. Times, details, anything to keep my brain from sliding off the rails, when the headlights appeared. Same car, same breathing idle. But this time the window was down 7 inches. The mouth was visible now, small and pale. Corners turned up in that not quite smile that made my stomach knot. The eye still fixed on me. The hand on the wheel lifted 3 fingers. Slower. More deliberate. Like it was counting something. I lifted the gate before the car even fully stopped. My fingers were numb on the switch. The arm rose with a screech that sounded almost like a question. The Caprice rolled forward, but it paused for 3 full heartbeats right beside the window. Close enough that I could have reached out and touched the door if the plexiglass wasn't there. The metallic smell flooded the booth so thick I gagged. The pale hand moved again. 4 fingers this time. Then the car kept going. I dropped into the chair the second it disappeared around the curve. My legs wouldn't hold me anymore. The receipt I'd been writing on had new words on it that I didn't remember putting there. Same handwriting as the note under the drawer, but the letters were shaky like my own. It sees you now. I stared at them until they blurred. I hadn't written that. I knew I hadn't. The pen was still capped on the desk. The motion light finally clicked off at 4:05 a.m., plunging the shoulder back into dark. I didn't turn it back on. Part of me was starting to think the light made things worse, like it was drawing attention instead of chasing it away. I tried to call the county office. No signal. I tried again every 5 minutes for the next half hour. The one bar on my phone flickered like it was laughing at me. At 4:37 a.m., I gave up and just sat with my back against the desk, knees to my chest, listening. The heater clicked. The wood stayed silent. Then, around 4:50, something new happened. The payment tray squeaked open on its own. I scrambled to my feet and stared. The tray was fully extended toward the outside, empty, waiting. No car in sight, no headlights. Just the tray sitting there like an open mouth. I reached out with the broom handle and pushed it shut. It slid back with a metallic clunk, then immediately squeaked open again. Slower this time, like whatever was moving it was getting stronger. I left it open. Didn't want to touch it anymore. The frost on the coins had spread to the entire drawer now. When I finally worked up the nerve to open it, the metal was so cold it burned my fingertips. The triangular fold on the top dollar bill was gone. In its place was a perfect circle, pressed into the paper, like a coin had been set on it and left there for hours. I picked the bill up. Underneath it was another quarter with the fingerprint dent. The print looked fresher, sharper, again like it had been refreshed, while I wasn't looking. I closed the drawer and backed away until my shoulders hit the wall. The fluorescent light buzzed louder, flickering once, twice. In the stutter of darkness, I thought I saw a shape standing just outside the window, tall and still, coat collar turned up. When the light steadied, there was nothing. Just empty road and black pines. That was the moment the pressure shifted from the car to me. I started talking to myself out loud, low and fast, the way people do when they're trying not to scream. It's just a car. Old rule. Some local thing. Frank lasted years. I can last one more night. The words tasted like lies. Every sentence I spoke made the air feel thicker, like the booth was listening and taking notes. At 5:12 a.m., another regular came through. Same trucker, Earl, and this time he stopped completely, engine idling, and rolled his window down. He looked at me through the plexiglass like he was seeing a ghost. "You still here?" he asked. His voice was rough, like he hadn't used it in days. I nodded. He glanced down the road north, then back at me. "Some folks say that Booth changes people. Frank stopped talking to his wife last year. Just stopped. You sleeping okay?" I lied and said yes. He handed me his toll without another word and drove off slower than usual, brake lights flashing twice like a warning. The Caprice's third pass of the night came at 5:29 a.m., earlier again. Window down 8 inches now. The mouth was smiling for real this time. Small teeth visible behind the pale lips. The eye reflected the booth light like wet glass. The hand lifted all 5 fingers, spread wide, and then slowly closed into a fist. The car idled for 15 seconds. Long enough for me to smell something new under the metal scent. Something like old paper and dust, the way the trailer smelled after I'd been gone all night. Long enough for the payment tray to squeak open again on its own and stay open, inviting. I almost broke. My hand hovered over the cash drawer. $2.50. That's all it would take. Drop the coins, close the tray, see what happened. The thought felt pushed into my head again. Stronger this time, like a finger pressing behind my eyes. I yanked my hand back and hit the gate switch instead. The arm went up. The Caprice rolled forward, but not before the driver's hand tapped the wheel once. 4 quick beats, like a code or a countdown. When it was gone, the radio suddenly blared to life, full volume. Makes Preacher's voice clear and calm. "Mike, you're running out of nights. Mike, the rule only works if you believe it." I ripped the cord out again, but the speaker kept going for 3 full seconds on some internal battery I didn't know it had. Then silence. The rest of the shift blurred into small horrors. The motion light clicked on and off at random. The coins in the drawer rearranged themselves into a straight line facing the window. The triangular fold came back on the dollar, but this time it pointed at my name written in frost on the plexiglass inside the booth. I hadn't written it. I wiped it away with my sleeve, and it left a streak that looked like a handprint. By 5:55 a.m., the sky was lightening, that weak gray that never quite chased the dread away. I locked the booth and walked to the trailer with the flashlight on, even though I could see fine. Inside, the cot was made up the way I'd left it, but the pillow had a dent in it like someone had been lying there watching the ceiling. I didn't lie down. I sat at the tiny table and added to the receipt list with a shaking hand. Night 5, 5 fingers. Fist. Tray opens itself. Radio knows my name again. It's learning me. I stared at the words until the sun was fully up. Then I crumpled the paper, burned it in the little sink with a lighter, and washed the ashes down the drain. I wasn't going to leave evidence anymore. Not for whatever was reading my notes when I wasn't looking. Sleep came in fragments that afternoon, full of green hoods and pale hands counting down. But I woke up twice to the sound of an engine idling right outside the trailer door, but when I looked, there was nothing. Just wind in the pines and my own pulse in my ears. When I walked back to the booth at 9:45 p.m. for the next shift, the motion light was already on, pointing straight at the payment window, like it had been waiting for me all day. The gravel shoulder was covered in fresh tire tracks, deep ones, circling the booth twice before heading north. I stepped inside and the fluorescent tube flickered once in greeting. The cash drawer was open. The note under it had new handwriting at the bottom, added since last night. My own handwriting, but I didn't remember writing it. Next time it stops, the window will be all the way down. I taped the note back exactly where it was and sat down in the folding chair. And the radio was playing softly, even though the cord was still unplugged. Gospel station. The preacher wasn't talking about forgiveness tonight. He was talking about choices. Some rules exist for a reason, Mike. Some cars don't want your money, they want something else. I turned the volume knob until it snapped off in my hand. The speaker kept going anyway, quieter now, like it was coming from inside the walls. Outside, the woods waited. The road waited. And somewhere out there in the dark, the green Caprice was already turning around, engine breathing soft and patient, coming back for its next pass. The pattern wasn't just forming anymore. It was tightening around me like a fist, 5 fingers closing slow, and I was starting to wonder how many more nights I could lift that gate before the rule stopped working. You see, before the car decided it didn't need the road at all, before it decided to stop. I checked the clock. 10:03 p.m. My shift had just begun, but the night already felt like it had been going on for years. The first regular wouldn't come for another hour. Plenty of time for the booth to get colder, plenty of time for the tray to open again, plenty of time for me to sit here and realize the worst part wasn't the car anymore. The worst part was how part of me was starting to wait for it. I pulled the folding chair closer to the window and stared out into the black. The motion light clicked off, then clicked back on a second later, even though nothing had moved. Something had. I just couldn't see it yet. The dread wasn't whispering anymore. It was sitting right beside me in the empty chair, breathing quiet, counting down on pale fingers. And the night was still young. Something had. I just couldn't see it yet. The dread wasn't whispering anymore. It was sitting right beside me in the empty chair, breathing quiet, counting down on pale fingers. And the night was still young. I didn't dare turn my head to look at the empty folding chair I'd pulled up next to the window. I could feel the weight of it there, the way the air felt slightly thicker on my right side, like an invisible coat collar turned up against the cold. The motion light outside clicked off again, then snapped back on a heartbeat later, painting the gravel shoulder in that harsh white that made every pebble look like a tooth. No car, no footprints, just the fresh tire tracks circling the booth twice, deeper than before, such at the outer loop, now cutting so close to the concrete foundation that the edge of one groove had started crumbling the lip of the pad. My hands were shaking so bad I had to grip the edge of the desk to steady them. The cash drawer was still open. Coins lined up like tiny silver soldiers facing the window. Frost creeping across the metal in those branching patterns that almost looked like roads now. Tiny maps leading north into the pines. I slammed it shut with my elbow. The sound echoed too loud in the booth, bouncing off the plexiglass and coming back distorted, like someone had repeated it a second too late. I forced myself to breathe slow. In through the nose, out through the mouth, the way the divorce counselor had taught me back when everything was just money and silence instead of this. It didn't help. The air tasted like battery acid and old paper. The radio cord lay on the floor where I'd ripped it free, but the speaker was humming anyway, a low static that rose and fell like breathing. Not the preacher this time, just the sound of someone waiting on the other end of a line that had never been plugged in. At 10:17 p.m., the first car of the night finally appeared, a logging truck loaded with fresh-cut pine. The driver a guy I'd seen maybe 6 times before. He slowed, window down, and tossed the exact change into the tray without a word. His eyes flicked to the empty chair beside me for half a second, then away fast, like he'd seen something he didn't want to name. "Cold tonight," he muttered. I nodded. He didn't wait for the ticket. Just rolled up the window and pulled out. The tail lights shrinking fast like he couldn't get away from the booth quick enough. I slid the gate down and sat there staring at the payment tray. It was still extended. I hadn't touched it. The coins he'd thrown in were already frosting over at the edges, the frost crawling toward the center like it was hungry. I left them there. Didn't want to feel how cold they were. The pressure in my chest was building different now. Not just fear. Something heavier. Like the booth itself was leaning in, the concrete walls inching closer every time I blinked. I stood up and paced the 3 steps to the back wall and back, counting each footfall out loud to keep my mind anchored. 1, 2, 3, 4. The fluorescent tube above me buzzed in time with my steps, flickering on the 5th lap. On the 7th lap, the light went out completely for 3 full seconds. When it snapped back on, the empty chair had moved 6 inches closer to the window. I stopped mid-step, heart jackhammering. I hadn't touched the chair. I backed up until my spine hit the desk. The motion light outside clicked off again. This time it stayed off for almost a minute, long enough for me to hear it, the soft breathing idle coming from somewhere just beyond the tree line. Not on the road yet, but close, circling, testing. The sound was inside my head as much as outside, vibrating in my molars like a tuning fork. I grabbed the broom from the corner and held it like a bat. Stupid. Pointless. But the weight of the wooden handle felt solid, something real in a night that was starting to bend. I swept the floor hard, pushing dust and nothing toward the door. Anything to move, anything to prove I was still in control of at least one small thing. The bristles scraped loud, too loud. When I reached the spot under the window, the broom head stopped short. Like it had hit something solid, I pushed harder. The handle bowed. There was nothing visible, but the broom wouldn't go forward. I dropped it. The handle clattered and rolled under the desk on its own, stopping right beside the frosted coins I'd left earlier. The triangular fold on the top dollar bill was back, but now it had company. A second fold, shaped like an arrow pointing straight at the chair. I sat down hard on the floor instead of the chair, back against the wall, knees up. The clock on the wall still read 3:33 a.m. My phone agreed. I'd been here less than 20 minutes into the shift, and time had already folded again. And the dread beside me felt warmer now, almost companionable, like it was settling in for the long haul. At 10:42 p.m., the Caprice made its first pass. It didn't come from the south like always. It came from the north, rolling backward down the road with no lights, engine breathing that same quiet rhythm in reverse. The taillights were on the front now, glowing red in the wrong direction. I scrambled to my feet and stared as it stopped directly under the dark motion sensor, window down 9 inches. The mouth was smiling wider, teeth visible. Small even, human-looking but too still. the eye locked on mine. The hand on the wheel lifted, not fingers this time, but the whole palm, pressed flat against the glass from the inside, like it was saying hello through a mirror. I hit the gate switch without thinking, and the arm jerked up with a screech that sounded almost grateful. The car rolled forward, still backward, passing the window close enough that the metallic sweetness flooded in so thick I tasted blood at the back of my throat. As it slid by, I saw the driver's face more clearly than ever. Not a face exactly, a suggestion of one. Pale skin stretched tight, no eyebrows, the eye reflecting my own terrified expression back at me like a funhouse mirror. The mouth moved. No sound, but I knew what it was saying. My name. Just my name. Shaped once. Slow. The car disappeared south, still moving in reverse. The gate clanged down behind it. The motion light finally clicked on, pointing straight at the empty road like it was accusing me of something. I stood there shaking, hands pressed to the plexiglass. The chair had moved again. Now it was right beside me, so close the armrest brushed my hip. I could see the impression in the torn cushion where something heavy had sat, the shape of a coat collar. The radio hummed louder. Not static anymore. A voice, faint, layered under the hum like it was coming up through water. Mike, you lifted the gate for me. Mike, you're starting to understand. I kicked the radio off the shelf. It hit the floor and kept humming. The psychological pressure was sinking in now, deep and personal, wrapping around my ribs like cold fingers. It wasn't just the car anymore. It was the way the booth was changing to fit the car, the way my own routines were becoming part of its pattern. I caught myself checking the window every 10 seconds, waiting for the next pass like some sick Pavlovian response. My legs felt heavy. It did. My thoughts kept sliding toward the cash drawer, toward the $2.50 I could drop in the tray just to see what would happen if the rule broke. I fought it, paced again, talked out loud the way I used to talk to my ex when the apartment got too quiet. This is a job. This is concrete and a gate and coins. This is not alive. The words bounced back wrong, like the walls were repeating them with a question mark at the end. At 11:05 p.m., a second regular came through. An old woman in a rusted Buick who always paid with a crisp 5 and told me to stay safe out here, honey. Tonight she didn't speak, just stared at the empty chair with wide eyes, handed me the money and drove off, with her shoulders hunched, like she was trying to make herself smaller. I watched her tail lights until they vanished, and felt something twist in my gut. She knew, and they all knew. Frank had known. Earl had known. The whole county probably whispered about the guy alone at the toll on 47 who was starting to look like the last one. The Caprice returned at 11:19 p.m., this time from the south. Forward, lights off, engine breathing louder, window all the way down now. The face was clearer, pale, smooth, the mouth moving in sync with the radio hum that had started again behind me. The hand reached out, not toward me, but toward the payment tray. Long fingers curled around the edge of the tray from the outside, testing it, pulling it open another inch, even though I hadn't touched the mechanism. The metallic smell mixed with something new, old upholstery and pine needles. The exact scent of the inside of that 92 Caprice I'd never been in. I lifted the gate before the fingers could do more. The car rolled through slow, almost reluctant, the driver's head turning to keep the single visible eye on me the entire time. As it passed, I saw the back seat for the first time. Empty. But the seatbelt was fastened across nothing, pulled tight like it was holding something in place. The gate came down. The chair beside me creaked, as if someone had just shifted their weight. I couldn't sit anymore. I couldn't stand still. The pressure was a living thing now, pressing behind my eyes, whispering that maybe the rule wasn't protection. Maybe it was an invitation. Maybe lifting the gate every time was exactly what it wanted, training me, shaping me into the next Frank, shaky hands and thousand-yard stare, passing the note to whoever came after. I grabbed my phone and tried to call the county office again. 0 bars. The screen glitched, in time flipping between 3:33 and 11:23 over and over. When I looked up, the cash drawer was open again. The coins had rearranged into a perfect circle around a single quarter. The one with the fingerprint dent. The print looked like mine now. Thumb and forefinger, exactly where I would have held it if I'd ever dropped the toll into the tray. I slammed the drawer so hard the whole desk jumped. The fluorescent light flickered in protest. In the brief dark, I heard the breathing idle again, closer, right outside the door this time. Not on the road. Parked at the edge of the booth pad. When the light came back, the motion sensor finally triggered, flooding the area. The Caprice was there, parked, engine off, but still breathing somehow. Driver's door open 2 inches. No one visible inside, but the dome light was on, casting a green glow across empty seats. The seatbelt in the back was still fastened tight. I backed up until I hit the rear wall. The empty chair slid across the floor on its own, stopping right in front of me like an invitation to sit and watch. The radio voice was clearer now. "Mike, it's easier if you come out. Mike, the rule was never for them. It was for you." I covered my ears. It didn't help. The voice was inside now, riding the pulse in my temples. The psychological break was happening in real time. I could feel my sense of what was normal cracking like thin ice. How many nights had Frank lasted before the car started parking? How long before he stopped fighting and just lifted the gate on autopilot, eyes blank, handing the curse to me? I whispered to myself, I am not Frank. I am not the next one. But even my own voice sounded borrowed. The Caprice's door opened another inch. Pale fingers curled around the edge from inside, the same hand I'd seen on the wheel. It didn't step out. It just waited. The breathing sound filled the booth now, syncing with my own lungs, whether I wanted it to or not. At 11:47 p.m., another car approached from the south. A state trooper this time, slowing for the booth out of habit, even though the county road toll was barely enforced. He rolled down his window and looked at me, then at the parked Caprice 20 feet away. His face changed. Not surprise. Recognition. He didn't ask questions. Just dropped $2.50 into the tray, took the ticket, and said quietly, "Keep that gate up, son, whatever you do." Then he drove off fast, lights flashing once like a goodbye. And the Caprice door closed softly. The car didn't move. It just sat there under the motion light, engine silent but present. The single eye I could see in the rear view mirror, watching me through the plexiglass. The pressure became unbearable. My legs gave out. I slid down the wall until I was sitting on the cold linoleum, knees drawn up, staring at the open driver's door of the car outside. The dread in the chair beside me leaned closer. I could almost smell the coat, old wool and pine. I started counting again. 1, 2, 3. Not footsteps this time. Heartbeats. Trying to prove I was still in control of something. The radio hummed my name between every number. The coins in the drawer clinked once, rearranging themselves into the shape of a gate. Up. The night stretched. The Caprice waited. The booth waited. And somewhere in the cracking parts of my mind, I realized the worst pressure wasn't the car or the rule or the cold. It was the slow, creeping realization that part of me was starting to wonder what the inside of that Caprice smelled like up close, what the seat would feel like if I sat in it, what would happen if, just once, I didn't lift the gate but walked out and asked the driver what it wanted. I shoved the thought down hard. It came back stronger, wearing my own voice. The fluorescent light flickered again. Longer this time. When it steadied, the Caprice had rolled 6 feet closer to the booth without a sound. Driver's door open wider, fingers tapping the wheel now. Patient. Counting. I closed my eyes and kept counting heartbeats. 1, 2, 3. The night was still young, and the pressure was only getting started. And I closed my eyes and kept counting heartbeats. 1, 2, 3. The night was still young, and the pressure was only getting started. The Caprice sat 20 feet away, driver's door open wider now. Dome light casting that sickly green glow across empty seats. The seatbelt in the back stayed pulled tight over nothing. I could hear the breathing idle even with my eyes shut. Low, patient, sinking perfectly, with every third heartbeat, like it had slipped inside my chest. The booth felt smaller, walls pressing in until the plexiglass window fogged from my own breath. The empty chair beside me creaked again, closer, the torn cushion dipping as if someone had just settled in to watch me break. I opened my eyes. The motion light outside stayed on, but the car had rolled another 10 feet forward without a sound. Yogi's pale fingers rested on the open door frame now, tapping once, twice, 3 times. The face inside leaned forward into the dome light. Smooth, pale, the single eye fixed on mine with something almost like recognition. The mouth moved. No sound through the glass, but I felt the shape of my name against my skin like cold breath. The cash drawer popped open by itself. Coins slid across the metal. Frost spreading so fast it crackled. They arranged themselves into a perfect arrow pointing straight at the open door of the Caprice. The triangular fold on the top dollar bill unfolded, then refolded into a tiny gate, lifted all the way up. I stood up slowly, legs numb, back sliding up the wall. The radio hummed louder, the voice no longer whispering. It spoke clear, calm, right behind my left ear, even though nothing was there. Mike. And the rule was only ever a suggestion. Come see what you've been protecting. My hand hovered over the gate switch out of pure habit. I didn't flip it. Instead, I took one step toward the door of the booth. The motion light brightened, as if approving. The Caprice's engine didn't turn over, but the breathing grew deeper, inviting. The fingers on the door frame curled once, beckoning. I stopped at the threshold. Cold night air hit my face, carrying that sweet, metallic scent, mixed with old pine and something personal. My own aftershave from the trailer, like the car had been inside my space while I slept. The gravel crunched under my boot even though I hadn't stepped out yet. The sound came from the Caprice's open door, echoing my movement before I made it. The pressure snapped something inside me. Not fear anymore. Curiosity, sharp and ugly, in the kind that had been growing since the 5th pass. I wanted to know what the seat felt like, what the radio inside played, whether the rule had ever mattered or if I had only been feeding it by obeying. I took the first step outside. The motion light flared. The Caprice door opened the rest of the way with a soft click. No one visible in the driver's seat now, but the wheel turned slightly left, then right, like invisible hands were testing it. The backseat seatbelt unclicked by itself and lay loose across the cushion. I walked 3 more steps. Gravel felt wrong under my boots. Too soft, like walking on frozen breath. The booth door swung shut behind me on its own. I didn't look back. The pale hand reappeared on the steering wheel, fingers drumming a slow countdown. 4, 3, 2, in 1 more step and I would be close enough to touch the green hood, close enough to see if there was a face in the rear view mirror looking back at me. The woods around us went dead silent. No wind, no distant truck rumble. Just the breathing, now coming from everywhere at once. I reached out. My fingertips brushed the cold metal of the hood. It wasn't cold. It was the exact temperature of my own skin. The car shivered under my touch like it had been waiting for this exact moment. The driver's seat creaked. A shape settled behind the wheel. Tall coat collar up. The outline of shoulders I recognized from every midnight pass. The eye turned toward me. Not threatening, expectant. I pulled my hand back. The hood stayed warm where I'd touched it. A perfect handprint, burned into the frost that instantly reformed around it. It's the voice from the radio inside the car, drifted out the open door, soft, almost kind. You don't have to charge me anymore, Mike. You never did. Just get in. The road goes both ways now. I stood there frozen between the booth and the open door, heart hammering so loud it drowned the breathing for a second. Part of me wanted to run back inside, flip the gate switch, scream the rule out loud until the sun came up. The bigger part, the part that had counted every pass, every finger lifted, every frozen coin, wondered what would happen if I climbed into the passenger seat and let the rule finally break. The Caprice rolled forward 6 inches, stopping with the open door perfectly aligned beside me, an invitation with no words left. I took 1 more step. The dome light dimmed. The eye in the driver's seat closed slowly, then opened again, waiting. Behind me, the booth light flickered once and went dark for good. The cash drawer inside clattered shut on its own. The note under it would stay there for whoever came next, whoever took the job after me. The next guy who thought quiet nights on County Road 47 were exactly what he needed. I put my hand on the door frame. The metal felt like it had been molded to my grip. The seat inside smelled like pine and old coffee and something that might have been home once. The engine breathed deeper, almost a sigh of relief. I didn't get in. Not yet. But I didn't step back either. The night held its breath with me. The road stretched north into the pines, black and patient, waiting to see which way I would choose. When the next set of headlights finally appeared around the bend. Some rules aren't broken. They're just traded. And somewhere out there in the dark, another green Caprice was already turning around, coming back for its next shift. The breathing inside the car matched mine perfectly now. I leaned in closer,